How are you?
Thanks.
About a couple months ago, Brett, I was trying to say, I was inviting somebody to the stage, and I was trying to say, let's show some love. And instead I said, in my mind, I started thinking, let's make some noise. And instead I said, let's make some love for Brett Trapp. So I've been trying to not say that recently because, I don't know, that just sometimes throws people off. But Brett, welcome.
Thanks.
We're so glad you're
Appreciate
here.
It. Thank you.
Are you a John Legend fan?
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, even if you aren't, it's all right. I'm not a big John Legend fan, so I don't celebrate his entire collection. I would, I just don't know it all. So, so you are an author, you are a blogger, you're a writer, same as an author, I guess. Are those two terms
I would not
synonymous?
call myself an author. Authors have fancy books and book deals, which I do not have, but I like to write words.
Okay, you just had a no book tour?
I had a bookless tour,
A bookless tour.
Yeah,
that was brilliant, by the way.
I didn't have a book, but I had a blog, and I just decided I was gonna do like a book tour, but bookless. And it was a fake book tour, and I had a fake book tour manager, Ashley, who came with me, and people came. It was awesome. Their expectations were hopefully very low. So.
Well, yeah, you had no book. You're like, I don't have a
exactly.
book. So if
why
you came,
are you here?
That's right.
I don't know.
If you came for a book, I don't have one. Well, I feel like so many people have read your writing and been impacted by it. And honestly, I consider you a vulnerability expert. And as we dive into your story, I think you'll understand why. You understand vulnerability in a way that a lot of people do not. So thank you. My hope for tonight is all of us at different points in our life are going to be on the other side of someone who chooses to be vulnerable. And in that moment, there's a real opportunity for us on how we handle that. And so I asked Brett to come and share some of his story and help us all be better people who can handle and care for friends of ours better. So that's really the hope for tonight. But before we get there, why don't you give us a little bit of your bio, tell us a little bit of your background. Yeah. You're a preacher's kid.
PK.
So you've been in some churches before.
Yeah, spent some time
Once
there,
or twice.
Yep. So my name's Brett. I grew up in a little town called Florence, Alabama, which is about maybe 30, 40,000 people, extreme northwest corner of the state. And I moved to Atlanta about 7.5 years ago, so I've been here since then. But I am a PK. My dad was a pastor of a Southern Baptist church called Woodmont Baptist Church. And for a small town, it was pretty big, maybe like 1,000 members or so.
Did y'all have a family life center?
We did not have a family life center.
Okay.
Highland Baptist did. That was our big rival.
Okay.
Yeah. So
they had you.
Yeah, we were like, people just go to Highland to play foosball and
That's
stuff.
right.
So
you just go there because you want to play
We're here
sports.
for Jesus.
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. Hardcore.
Yep.
Christians.
So mom and dad, both fantastic. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, Brady, Brian, and Brett. So we have the B thing going on. Yeah.
That's right.
So grew up there, small town, loved my church, fantastic family, nothing but great memories, about from the people at Woodmont, which I wrote a lot about that in the blog. But yeah, went to school there from 5 years old up through 5th year of college. And so I went to a small Christian high school called Schultz Christian School and graduated with 26 people. It was awesome, very kind of conservative evangelical school. Felt, again, just an incredible experience, felt very loved, and had a great time. Then went to college in the same town, University of North Alabama, joined a fraternity, which I never thought I would do. Both my brothers went to fraternity and had horrible experiences, but I joined one called Alpha Tau Omega and got very, very involved. Sort of the subplot of all that was in 1997, my dad was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. So if you don't know about Lou Gehrig's, ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, that's what it was for. It's always fatal.
You knew about the Ice Bucket Challenge before.
Oh, yeah. As soon as it started, I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So there's no treatment for ALS. It's just sort of a death sentence. And so 16 years old, he was diagnosed with that. It sort of spurred really kind of a mini revival in our church. All kinds of people sort of gathered around our family in a really beautiful and supportive way. And there was really this sort of prayer movement to pray for his healing. We had somebody organize a 24-hour prayer chain. So there was somebody praying for my dad 24 every single day of the day. Somebody printed off all these bumper stickers that were white and had big red letters that said "Pray for Brother Bill," which my dad went by Brother Bill. And then one night, I wrote about this as well. Everybody came over to the house, and this lady said, "I feel like God wants us to march around your house 7 times like Jericho, and then We're all going to shout, you know. And we're like out in suburbia. So this is not, you know, in Florence, Alabama, this is not a normal thing. So everybody comes over, we do our marching and it's raining and very kind of a Gothic scene, you know. And then we all shout, you know, and believing for God to heal him. And we were all in on that. I really believe that's what God was leading us to do. And then the fall of 2000, I start college, joined the fraternity, and December 31st, my dad passed away at 12:33 p.m. And super difficult, very hard, left me with tons of questions, and sort of sent my faith into a tailspin. I'd become a believer a few years earlier at a charismatic revival in Pensacola, Florida, called Brownsville Assembly of God is the name of the church. Some of you may have attended that, but had always been around religion, but never knew Jesus, and that's a big difference. And so I think that was 96 when I met Jesus at that revival. Dad was diagnosed a year later, but tons of great things happened in that season of Dad's sickness. You know, our youth group grew and the church grew, and a lot of really great things happened. But obviously, when he passed away, it was tough. So.
I told Brett this morning, I sent Brett this like really heartfelt email. After I sent it, you ever send an email and then you read it and you're like, I don't know, that might have been a little much, you know?
It was 5:58 a.m. It was early.
I am an early riser, so I was at work. I get here in the morning fairly early, and oftentimes I'll read the Bible or pray or sometimes write, journal, whatever. But someone had, I've only read your blog. Someone said, oh, well, hey, you should check out the podcast because it's a brilliant idea, but Brett just reads his blog. And so I just started with the one that was most impactful when I read it. It's called Good, Good Father, number 11.
Yeah, yep.
And so I'm like sobbing at like 5:30 this morning, just reading this, and I'm like, and I don't hardly even know you. And I'm just, but it's amazing how impactful your words are. You are a really fantastic, I told you this earlier tonight, but you are a true skilled linguist. You know how to put words together really, really well. And I'm from Alabama too, and so it doesn't come natural for us from Alabama to be able to put words together. We can combo curse words well, creatively, but
we can say roll tide.
That's right.
War eagle,
and it is rolling. So anyway, I just so many people have been impacted. So tell us a little bit about Blue Babies Pink, because that launched about a year ago, and it's just been, I feel like it's been a big deal.
Yeah, launched in September. BlueBabiesPink.com is the website if you want to check it out. But so Blue Babies Pink was the culmination of sort of a 10-year private project, really. Sometime around middle school or high school, I began to realize I wasn't really attracted to girls. And didn't really think much about it. Just kind of thought, that's kind of weird. Like everybody else is kind of into dating and I'm just not. And so, you know, did football and basketball and student golf, all this different stuff. So stayed very busy. And then, you know, college rolled around and I still wasn't attracted to girls. And then I had this experience where I saw this guy at a church camp. I was like, I think I'm attracted to guys, but like, I'm not gay, because gay is like, you know, this like, you know, rainbow flags and like activism in like New York. And I'm like, I'm just a kid in Florence, Alabama. And like, I love Jesus. And like, that's not me. And so.
You're like, at my Southern Baptist church, they're not real cool with the gays. So.
Alabama, Florence, Alabama in the 90s was not, you know, not like a hotbed.
That's right. A hotbed for homosexuality.
Positivity,
that's right.
Positive gay vibes. So, and so really going through college, just drowned myself sort of in the fraternity. And I would, you know, go to like date parties, things with girls, but just was never really wanted to date, was not there. And so graduated college and was just sort of hit in the face of the reality of like, Brett, I think you're gay. Like, I think that's what this is. And just sort of kind of went down this, just this road of sadness and went to counseling and really was convinced that, you know, being a person who believes the Bible and loves the Lord, really was utterly convinced this was not God's will for me. And so did the counseling thing. And, you know, there's a thing called reparative therapy, which gets covered in the news a lot, which is where they, you know, try to like change your sexual orientation. And it's really negative, and there's really some crazy stories out there. That wasn't my experience. I had a pretty good experience with counseling. And I lived in Birmingham. But then just kind of began to get very lonely, you know, and not dated. And people were always asking, like, why don't you date? You know, what's going on? And
can I interrupt? Had you told anybody other than your counselor at this point?
Yeah, so no, the first person I told was 2006. So again, I was completely gripped by fear. You know, completely terrified to breathe a word. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm just never gonna tell anybody. This is just like my thing, and I don't know what it is, but so came out to a mentor, had a one-on-one conversation with a guy in Birmingham who was incredibly gracious, worked for a parachurch ministry. And but then, you know, again, started with a startup, a company called Booster that I worked for many years. It does fundraising for schools, and sort of just became a total workaholic, just trying to just kind of shut out that noise and that little voice that was like, Brett, this is a thing, you got to deal with it. And my theory was, let me just work myself to death. So 12, 14, 16 hours a day, if that's what it took, like, great, that's what I'll do. And that was sort of my vice, which is a great, working too much is actually the best of all the bad vices.
It's a lot better than drugs.
You build it, it's better than drugs.
Right.
You build a great career, but it's incredibly emotionally unhealthy. But that was the best I could do at the time. But the whole time was, you know, still attending church, surrounded by community, had great Christian friends, but just did not feel comfortable telling anybody because I thought, this is too weird. You know, there's such a taboo around that topic, specifically in the South, that I was like, I can't tell. This is not safe. Nobody's safe to tell that to. And so 2007, I got out my phone and I took a note. I had the sense of like, Brett, just start writing this down. Like, and really had the sense of like, one day, maybe you should talk about this. But I didn't know how or when, but I just began taking notes on every little experience I had, every thought, every lonely moment. Every time I would hear a friend say, you know, some kind of homophobic thing, I would just record it because I just had the sense of like, write it all down because you might want to remember it one day. And so fast forward, moved to Atlanta in 2009 and worked, and worked more, exactly. And really about a year or two ago, I began to get the sense of, Brett, you know, it's time to tell some more people. This was actually 5 years ago. So began to kind of have one-on-one conversations with all my kind of close inner circle. And I literally made a list of like safe people, you know. I mean, like number one on down the list. And I was like, you know, I'm going to just start going one by one and just having this conversation to say, hey, I'm same-sex attracted. I don't even use the word gay, but like, and I have no plans on dating, and I'm committed to, you know, the single celibacy thing. But began to have these conversations, and I was met with a lot of love, you know. And I don't know why I was surprised by that, because all these people were loving, good friends and that kind of thing. But was just scared, still super scared to have that conversation. The first 10 times I had it, it was just a weep fest. I mean, it's just nothing but tears, and I'm shaking, and it was really tough. And then a couple years ago, just had the sense of, Brett, it's time to tell this story. In 2008, I read this article out of the Memphis Commercial Appeal, and it was about a guy named Sheldon Carones, and he was a doctor in Memphis, sort of a neonatal kind of doctor. Memphis at the time had one of the highest infant mortality rates, and infant mortality is any child that dies before the age of 1. And this guy, he was like 80 years old, he had committed his life to reversing this trend in Memphis. So he opened a center and got all this funding. He's unbelievable. And so this article was sort of a biopic looking back on his life, and they asked, they said, what do you want to be known for? How do you hope to be remembered? And his response was, turning blue babies pink.
Oh my gosh.
And reading that article, it was like God highlighted that little phrase, and something about it, I was like, that is it. It's like, that's it. I was like, that's what my story's gonna be. I don't know when or where or how I'm gonna be confident doing it, but this story of going from death to life, and at that time in my life, I just felt really dead and really sad. And so fast forwarding to last fall, resigned from my position at my company, had a great experience, but knew it was time to move on and professionally and do some consulting, that kind of thing. So on September the 6th, I put out a website, bluebabiespink.com. I'd owned the URL for like 8 years or something, paying my little $12.99 a month or whatever. And
that's belief right there. Belief in a dream.
Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this thing, but
for
I know
all
I'm supposed to keep it.
With that GoDaddy subscription, you just keep paying it because it is going to pay off.
One day, that's right. And so literally September 6th, I hit the publish button and I published a thing called A Gossip Guide to Brett Trapp's Sexuality. And it was kind of weird and shocking, but I was just like, you know what, I kind of do this in like a cheeky and light way, and people have been like talking, I'd heard of rumor, what is Brett, why doesn't he date, what's the deal? Maybe he's asexual, maybe he's just into his work too much, whatever it is, all these different theories. And so I just put all those in like this little kind of like fun graphic, and then pulled in some other kind of silly cliches, and at the bottom I was like, yeah, but I am gay. And then the next day I told people, I just said, hey, I'm gonna write about this. For the next 44 days, I'm gonna do a post per day, and I'm gonna just take you through this journey that I've been on, because a lot of people, when they come out, it's a very emotional thing, and it's sometimes filled with anger and a lot of negativity, which I totally understand. But I just wanted to give people the chance to like walk alongside and say, let me take you back, to high school, college, and let me just show you what this was like, and really with no agenda to twist arms or debate about theology. It was just, this is my story, and you can do with it whatever the heck you want. But if you want to come along, you can. And so a lot of people began to check it out at that point.
Was there a point when you were like, oh my goodness, this is bigger than just my friends now. Like,
Yeah.
people are reading this. I mean, I told you today earlier that I can't believe it's only been 6 months since the whole thing, the 44-day, because I remember there was a month where I feel like I had 12 people say, oh my goodness, you got to go see this website, read this blog. And I couldn't believe, oh, he's in Atlanta. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So what was there a moment?
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I knew my friends and family would read it, and they were the ones I wanted to read it, and really kind of friends from back home in Alabama, just so they could kind of understand, like, it's not just some like random decision. I woke up one day and I'm going to be it, and so those are the people I wanted to read it. And I made the point early on. I said, if nobody reads this thing, that's totally fine. Like, this is for me. This is part of my healing process to stop running and hiding from this big, bad ghost that I had been running from my whole life and been consumed with thoughts about worry and what do I do and how's this going to work and sadness and loneliness and stuff. So yeah, the first day about 3,000 people came to the site, and I didn't really promote it a ton. I had told my kind of inner circle I was going to do it, and they shared it out and that kind of thing. But yeah, and then more people started reading, and I did the daily release thing, and people were like, why don't you just release it all at once? Like Netflix. I'm like, this ain't Netflix. This is just a dude in Atlanta sitting on his couch. Every day I was writing, like I'd kind of plotted out like a story, how the story would be, but like I didn't have it pre-written. So then people would get antsy. If it wasn't up by noon, it was like, Brett, I get this one sweet lady in California, and she's like, Brett, we're waiting. Where's today's article at? And are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm writing. Give me some time. So, which I'm a creative at heart. I love writing. I love the design piece. So really had a really fun time kind of putting the story together and trying to tell it in a really authentic and vulnerable way. So.
What I want to do for our time is that I want to talk about that list that you made, that list of people that you said, hey, these are people that I would deem safe. I mean, when I want to go and have this conversation, these are the kinds of people that I want to tell, because I think there's something to be learned from all of us, or for all of us, I think we all, no matter what you believe about Jesus, what you believe about faith, we all want to be the kind of person that lands on that list. So there's a statement that you made as we were communicating back and forth about the difference between really trusting someone and just kind of trusting someone.
Yeah, so if you're in this room and you have like a big secret, you play this game in your mind a lot. You're constantly like thinking about your friends or family, like what would they think? Okay, what would that person think? And then you're kind of like reading the tea leaves of how they act and like, so I was in the closet for like 20 years. I'm constantly just like watching people talk about the homosexuality issue and kind of like, okay, that person just said a really terrible thing. They're down the list, But then I kind of came down to like, I was so gripped by fear, and I realized like, man, there's people in my life who I 99% trust. Great people, close friends, but I'm like, 99 is different from 100. And so really when I got down to it and I made that list, it was like maybe eight people I feel like, who were like, no, like I can be honest with this person and they're not gonna like flip over the table and call me a freak and storm out the room. And so that's where I started, because I was way too weak and scared to go anything beyond that. So I was like, God, just give me the strength to like talk to these people. And it was but beautiful, a really beautiful situation.
The way you said it, which I love this, we're gonna put this on the screen in case this is something you wanna write down. To me, it was a super memorable line, which again, Brett, it's just such a compliment to your gift. But you said there's a difference between trusting someone 99% and 100%, which I think that's powerful, because we all want to be a 100% kind of friend. So as we think through, just give us a couple thoughts, or tell us about why is vulnerability so tough? Yeah. And why is it so important that we would be 100% kind of trustworthy people?
Do you mean why would we share, or why would somebody share with us?
Yeah, why is this so important for me as a friend to be a 100% kind of person? Because that moment when you decided to share, that's extreme vulnerability, and that's hard and difficult. Tell us why it mattered so much that the friend was trustworthy. What was at stake in that moment for you?
Well, for me, so with this issue, because the topic is quite taboo, and again, when you're in the situation, you have a secret, you play out all the worst case scenarios. Yep. And I mean, boy, in my mind, it was just this apocalypse is going to descend on me if anybody knew this. I mean, my family's going to abandon me, my friends are going to abandon me, I'm probably going to be fired from my job, my landlord might find out and kick me, like who knows? It's just like, it's craziness, and none of that stuff happened. But in my mind, you kind of assume the worst, and part of that's just self-protection, where you're like, you know what? If that does happen, I got to be ready, and I got to be ready to kind of defend myself and survive. And so So I think people are just scared to be vulnerable and terrified. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, you have a gut. You know the people in your life that are trustworthy.
Yeah.
And all of us do. There are safe people in your life. I think some people are kind of gifted with just this internal kind of magnetism, this aura they give off of, hey, you can trust me. And then some of us have to work for it. You know, we have to work to be a person that is safe.
You use the phrase siren of hope, which I think is powerful. Unpack that statement.
Yeah, I made a note on that, how vulnerability it's a powerful siren of hope for other hurting people. Once I launched this project, the thing I was not prepared for was just a tsunami of emails and Facebook messages, and I think I got a few things on LinkedIn even, like.
Somebody like saying something negative on LinkedIn?
No, it wasn't negative.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But people just sort of crashing in on the shore because I'd kind of put myself out there. They'd now felt the freedom to do that as well. And a lot of
being vulnerable as well.
Being vulnerable as well, yeah. So it was like when I kind of put that thing out there and just said, this is my story, this is my little sort of truth, you know, do with it what you will. That was like a massive magnet that pulled people in.
Wow.
And what I began to observe, and I actually saw this years earlier in my one-on-one conversations, every single time I would have that tough conversation, they would tell me something about their life. You know, they had an abortion when they were in high school, or, you know, they had some kind of tough divorce, or they were abused as a child. And this really sacred moment of us just kind of bonding over the fact that we're broke. You know, we're all broken. We all have stories, and none of us really feel safe to share, but there is a reciprocity of vulnerability that is so beautiful.
Wow.
And which is such an incentive to me to like stop living such fake lives, because everybody in this room wants that moment.
That's right.
Everybody needs somebody just to be real with. And so I was just like, you know, God, let me be that person. And if I feel like every gay preacher's kid in America has emailed me, you know, like, because they just felt this connection.
Give me a number. Like how many gay preacher's kids have emailed
at least
you?
100.
That is crazy.
Maybe at least 100. That's not an exaggeration.
And honestly, like that is so massively important.
Yeah.
That they felt like, Brett, you shared, and now I can share with you.
Yeah, and it's like you think your story is dirty or shameful, whatever it is, and it also feels very niche. But that's the beauty of it, is that when you put your story out in kind of a niche way, that's going to draw people in who are connecting with some part of that.
Wow.
And so so many really sad stories, you know, that have come my way, and I'm trying my best to, you know, respond and field them, but it's really tough. So we need more people. We need you guys to like be there for a lot of these people. I love that.
So. Brett said when we were talking about a month ago, when we were talking about this, he was like, gosh, like this night needs to go really well because I need some help responding to some of these emails. I need more people who are willing to be sirens of hope, honestly. Yeah. So what I did is I said, hey, Brett, give us, we want this to be helpful. We want this to be practical. So I gave him 2 very practical questions. The first one is, how can I be? Because honestly, this is not just, I feel like I'm in the audience learning as well from you, and I have been since the first day I read Blue Baby's Pink, because I want to be that kind of person. Naturally, as a pastor, there is an implicit, I need to share this with you, which honestly, some of that I don't like. I want to be that kind of person because I'm that kind of person. And I think we all want to be that kind of person. So what can we do? Give us some thoughts on how we can become a more safe person when someone chooses to be vulnerable with us.
Yeah, so the challenge of these conversations is it's always an ambush. You know, nobody's gonna be like, hey, tomorrow, you know, we're gonna have this really tough conversation, I need you to be ready. Like, so you're never prepared. So that's why I like having this conversation now. So my first kind of little thing is don't freak out.
That's great.
There's never a reason to freak out in these conversations. You know, there's a time later, if you wanna talk theology and your opinion and your thoughts, that time will come. But in that moment where somebody bears their soul, boy, that's not the time. And I wrote episode 29 of Blue Baby's Pink. It's called Lifeboats. And I cried my eyes out writing that story because I was retelling the story of coming out to my mom and my stepdad and my brother. And I drove 7 hours to Kentucky and just scared to death. I mean, so 30-something years old and just so scared. And, you know, knocked on mom's door unannounced, and it was an ambush. And I said, you know, Mom, we need to talk. And had that conversation. And thankfully, my mom handled it well, and my brother did too. And I know I've heard from so many parents of gay kids, and they regret. You know, they wish they could take back that moment where their child came out to them. And they're so regretful for that. And so just don't freak out. There's no reason to freak out, because if you freak out, that signals to that person that this is a big deal. And it's worse than you imagined. And so keep your calm. Don't freak out. So lifeboats was the little metaphor I wrote for that. It's like somebody comes on a lifeboat and they've been out at sea and they're all bedraggled and messed up and they come on your front doorstep. You don't lecture them in that moment.
Right.
You don't
How
lecture.
dare you?
Yeah, you don't lecture. We don't talk theology in that moment.
Right.
You give them what they need and you listen. So don't freak out. Whew.
That is so powerful. And it's what you said about you can't get prepared in the moment. We don't train for the marathon in the marathon. You got to do all that training, which is what tonight is. Hopefully, tonight is our way to get ready for that moment when somebody's going to knock on our door. And so this is such important advice from you to us, I think, to say, hey, get yourself ready. There's going to come a moment. When the moment comes, go ahead and prepare yourself now. Don't freak out. That's huge. Give us the next one.
The second thought is don't make it about you. This happens almost universally. And we're all of us, I'm included, we're self-focused people. And so somebody says their thing and then we kind of chime back, well, I had a thing just like that. And, I had a similar experience and you go for 10 minutes about your thing. It's like, that is not your moment. This is their moment. Let that be their moment. And again, you can share your thing later. There's time for that later. But in that moment, let them have it and try not to turn it back on yourself.
Now, there is that when I read your notes and read that, I was challenged a little bit because I thought, okay, well, isn't there, I'm sure people are well-meaning because they just want to connect. They want to let you know you're not alone.
Yeah.
So were there moments when people did that, when they said, hey, me too, and made you feel like you weren't alone, but yet still let you have your moment? Is there a balance there?
Yeah, and I think even, again, these conversations can last 10 minutes, they can last 2 hours, 4 hours in some cases, and so that can come later, again, that's fine, but just in that initial moment, just let them have it and listen, maybe ask a few questions.
That's great, that's easier for some people to do than others. I am a talker, so that's hard for me to do, but that's really important. So take us to the next one.
Yep, so the third point is ask questions. I had been hiding this thing for so long. I loved it when people would ask questions. Now, everybody's not that way, and that's another point, is everybody's story's different, everybody's in a different place. So ask them if it's okay to ask questions.
That's a great way to
Me
put
personally, I wanted to just talk this thing out. For me, it was if you don't ask questions at all, that kind of reinforces the stigmatized aspect of the conversation. And they're talking about the game tomorrow. That's not a good thing either. So if it's appropriate, if it's safe, do the question thing.
Were there in those moments when you think back to some of those crucial conversations that you had where you chose to be vulnerable, were there healthy questions that people asked you that just made you feel loved and like someone was interested in you? Any memories there?
Yeah, my favorite memory, and I wrote about it, but was my friend Kelly, who's the safest of people. And I was eating chocolate biscuits and gravy at this little diner in Alabama when I had the conversation. And as soon as I said
and I'm sorry, but that's a thing.
That is a thing. In Alabama, chocolate biscuits and gravy.
Biscuits and gravy.
You haven't had it, you're missing out. So
Waffle House is here tonight.
Yes. Look that up on Pinterest when you get home.
I don't know if they will.
It's delicious. And so in that moment, Kelly's response was, I'm sorry. And something about that was the most beautiful. That just very basic statement was so empathetic, and it was in that moment, her first response was to recognize all those years of silent pain I'd been in, desperately wanting someone to empathize with me, but not able to. And in that moment, and so talk about waterfalls, that was in the gravy, that was the thing. But Kelly is such a dear friend and was so gracious to start there. So.
Is there any caution on, and maybe the answer is, well, ask him if you can ask questions. I think that's really great, but I don't know, I just worry about if I just go in and start asking questions, is that getting into the business too much?
Yeah.
Or do I need to?
Again, I think ask permission.
Yeah.
It's very simple, just say, hey, is it okay if I ask a few questions? That's as simple as that. Yeah. And I think most times people want you to. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want to go to bed. So, just start there.
That's great. That's great.
Make it simple.
The second big question that I asked you to answer was, in the moment when you're sitting there and someone brings this to you, how should we respond? And some of that is the not freaking out. But is there any counsel, any advice, anything you've learned from your journey on how we should feel in that moment? Any advice about how we should handle ourselves on the other side of it?
I mean, other than just compassion, empathy, all the stuff, we were taught in Sunday school. I mean, it's just a kind of a sacred moment when somebody bears a part of their soul. And so just honor that, sit in it with them. Don't try to fix it, don't try to change it. Just listen.
That's great. And there were a number of different episodes. You talked about overhearing and recalling what people had said previously. So tell us about that, about even when you were listing those safe people, you remembered people that had said things.
Yeah.
How can we remember that? How can we help us understand how important that is to think about what we're saying now? Because all of us have a gay friend, and you might not know they're gay yet. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I call it sort of casual, judgy language. And when you're with close friends, all of us say things we probably shouldn't say. And so I had this weird perspective of sort of being like undercover, and like, I remember this one time I was at a bachelor party and my friend said, gay people are the closest thing we have to aliens, And I was like, what does that even mean? And like, and in that moment, I had to choose. You have to choose. How am I going to respond to that in my heart? And so, I'm just a big believer in forgive quick, grace, move on, and don't hold it against him. We've talked about it since then. He's asked for forgiveness. It's been a really sweet conversation. So I just think, have relationships where there's just not this kind of flippant, judgy kind of language, whether that's around anything, race or sexual orientation or whatever it is. There's just no reason for that. So
you do an amazing job, Brett, of just. You have so much graciousness, even for people that are on the other side of a hard conversation, even with your mom, because you and your mom don't necessarily agree on everything, I don't think.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Where do you get that graciousness that you have?
Grace comes from Jesus, and I'm just a believer in. I can be a jerk sometimes. Oftentimes, I need people to forgive me. Friends and people that I know can be jerks. I need to forgive them, and so. And we're not going to see eye to eye. If you mentioned my mom, I love my mom to death. We have a great relationship. We had very rocky times the last few years. Lots of emails back and forth, debating, a lot of theology and back and forth. And I kind of just realized it was like we were both like holding a gun at each other saying, believe like me or else. And we were in this just gridlock for years. And about a year ago, or maybe less than that, we both just kind of decided, we're going to put the guns down and we're going to learn to love each other in spite of massive disagreement. And so I've begun to just try to apply that little sense of graciousness to all things cultural, politics, all the things that we disagree about. Life's too short to just live holding grudges and being angry and trying to twist someone to believe like we do, because it's not our job. It's just not. So
that's great. We're gonna have a little time of Q&A. So if you have questions that you want to ask Brett. I told Brett earlier, I said, hey, I'd love to do some Q&A at the end. He's like, hey, isn't the whole thing Q&A? Yes, it is Q&A, but we're going to let the audience, we want you guys to be able to. So I think we're going to put a phone number up. There it is, wham, bam. So text that number if you want, and we've got some people that are going to filter the questions. And by filter them, I mean take the best, most well-said question and ask a few of those. Kidding. We'll try to answer all of them if we can. But while we're doing that, another thing I wanted to ask about was that the moment with your employer was tricky because, like you said, that's just not easy, and you never know how it's going to go. But that went really well.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that was one of your first conversations that you had.
Yeah, it was early.
Can you tell us about that, or what can we learn even on the other side of that?
Yeah, again, the challenge with this particular secret is that you just don't know what people really think, because it is sort of taboo. We don't talk about it a lot. In the South, somebody may have really strong emotions around it, and somebody might not at all. And so when it comes down to your job, it's like, well, what is my boss going to think? Is that going to be an issue? And thankfully, I had an incredible boss, and had that conversation, cried my eyes out again, and was so gracious and so kind, and just said, Brett, this doesn't change anything. Let's get back to work. And that was such a healing moment for me to come into that conversation with just this burden of what could go wrong, what could happen. Although, deep down, I think I knew it wouldn't. It's just, what if it does? Mm-hmm. So to see Chris respond in such a loving way was really, really inspiring, and I'm super grateful for him to this day.
Well, you're so honoring of the people around you, which is awesome. All right, so here's a few questions, Brett. This is This is running and gunning. So here's the first one. Has anyone told you look like Ryan Reynolds?
Oh, wait a minute. Yes. Yes. Somebody whoever sent this, they know my story. I was actually walking, I live in Cabbagetown down in the city, and was walking through, and this guy sitting outside of a bar may have had a few drinks. He said, "Hey, bro." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Has anyone ever told you look like Ryan Reynolds with a big forehead?" I was like,
I
no, but I
want that to be a compliment so
right.
bad.
I'm like, you were doing so good.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Thank you for calling out my biggest insecurity. You could land an airplane on my forehead. Like, but I was like, nope, no one's ever told me that. You're the first. So,
that's awesome.
Thanks.
That's great. We've gotten a number of questions about your faith. I think that's the thing that one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you, Brett, in front of this crowd was because I think you handle faith so well, and it's so genuine. Your faith is so sincere. So somebody asked, any Bible verses that have really spoken to you that have encouraged your faith, and it could be anything, but in regards to vulnerability even, or just the way God allows us to bring all of our stuff to Him. Any thoughts on anything? This is like a real Christian thing to do, to put you on the spot and say, what's your favorite Bible verse?
I was actually, was in Romans 12. Yeah, Romans 12. Yesterday and this morning, I spoke to a small group of people. And if you look at Romans 12, I think starting in verse 8, the context of that, in the bigger context of where we are culturally, and Paul starts saying all these crazy backwards things. Treat others better than yourself. Do not return revenge with more revenge. As long as it is up to you, be at peace with all men. Live in harmony. So it's almost like Paul's having this like hippie kind of like liberal moment,
right.
But it's like, feed your enemy. If your enemy's hungry, feed him. And so that sort of thinking, as far as just grace and loving our enemies, is sort of the foundation of my thoughts on God. I just cringe when I see people who are consumed with bitterness and anger. People have reasons to be bitter and angry. Yeah. But it's just a dead end.
Yeah.
And so you got to choose early on, how am I going to just react to bad stuff? And so I just try to forgive quick, and I'm certainly imperfect in that. But.
I love Andy Stanley, obviously, is a big hero of mine. I'm paid for him to be a hero. But he says all the time, over and over again, hey, if you have a faith that causes you to mistreat people, there's something wrong with your faith, which I think that's essential. That's some of what you're saying there, that our faith should encourage us to be more loving and more gracious. And honestly, I long for a world where Christians are at the top of the list of people I would want to be vulnerable with. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that's not always been true of Christians.
Yeah, yep. Need to lead with love.
Yes.
Always, yeah.
Okay, so this is great. This is a specific question, Brett, but here's what someone wrote. My parents don't speak to me now because I'm gay and I'm in a relationship. What should I say when they approach me and say I can't be gay and a Christian and that the Bible I read is different than theirs? How would that person handle that? In 60 seconds, Brett, what should you say?
Man, we could stay here all night.
Just so you know, that's not Brett's number, so they're probably like, hey,
gotcha.
can I just talk to you offline?
So to this person, one thing I would say is you're not going to change anything about your parents, their beliefs. Definitely not overnight. I think the more we try to change people and fight and argue and debate, the less they're changed, and that's not really the point. And so I just go back to this very foundational piece of you're going to have to learn to give grace to people that don't like you. It's just part of the faith.
Wow.
That is a prerequisite for the Christian faith, in my opinion, is you're going to have enemies, and your job is to just love them. And so if that person is your mom or your dad, and that is a terrible, I hate that answer.
No.
I hate it,
hard.
I want to just say, tell them to, take a hike and move out and do something else. But that's not what you need to do. So just dwell on, grace and Jesus and try to react in that moment. And, there's resources you can point them to, of course. There's books and blog, that kind of thing. But just hold yourself with a level of integrity, and that's all we can control is ourselves.
Wow.
That's all we can control. And you do your part and kind of let God do the rest and just kind of live in that cliche because it's true. So.
Paul ends that whole section with, do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good, which is what you're saying to this person is, hey, honestly, that response, I believe, is evil.
Yep.
and don't be overcome by that, but
Yeah.
you have to rise above it. I mean, Michelle Obama's statement, I believe it was at the Democratic convention, where she said, when they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, how powerful is that statement?
Yeah, one other thought for that person. This is hard on your parents too. It's hard on them. No parent expects this. I likened it in the blog to, it's literally like going through the stages of grief. The person they thought their child was, once this is kind of revealed, to them it feels like, who is this, and how does this work? And so give them time, to work through some of that stuff, because it's hard, it's tough, and it's not easy. So
that's great. Okay, let's see. My best I wanted to read this. We'll get to that one in a second. So how do you listen well to someone who is bearing their soul, in parentheses, or secrets, to you, while they are also about to self-destruct because of the thing that they're talking about?
Self-destruct, I'm assuming that means some kind of self-harm, or perhaps. I think in that situation, we need to talk, counseling, therapy, call the police if that's what it takes. So I think just directing them to somebody who is definitely more of a licensed professional. I don't know what to say beyond that. I mean, you keep doing your part, listen, love, ask questions, but at the end of the day, if they're in a really tough spot, take some action to get them some help. So.
Yeah, I think trying to stay with them as long as possible, I think, is really helpful. Trying to stay in their presence is really helpful. And then I think there are times where you have to say, hey, God loves this person more than I do. I can't save this person. I need to try to point them to some resources, to a counselor, to a professional. And then I need to at that point, I have done all I can do, I think. Here's another question. My best friend from college came out after we graduated and parted ways. She got married last fall, and I went to her wedding, but I was never really there during the season she came out. Would it be weird at this point to go to her and ask to hear her story?
No, I don't think it's ever weird. I don't at all. Now, again, it's contextual. What does that person think?
Sure.
But no, have that conversation. She probably wants to share it. She's probably dying to share it. So do it. Yeah, 100%.
It's great. That was easy. Whoever you are, you have homework.
Sure. I knew that one.
Okay, so I am LGBT Christian here with a group of LGBT Christians. How do you walk your Christian walk, and what do you think the best way we as gay Christians can be a beacon of hope?
I think being gay can be a fantastic advantage. I have learned so much about grace and forgiveness. Paul talks about the thorn in his flesh, and this is sort of, for a lot of us, we felt that way. And again, like so many things in life, it can push you down a path of anger and bitterness and, all that kind of stuff, and things happen. Or you can let it push you the other direction. And that's what I've tried to do, very imperfectly. I have walked with God in some seasons and utterly not walked with him in others. And if you read Blue Baby's Pink, God kind of goes dark in episodes like 30 through 40. Because I didn't want to, tell a story that, me and God were buddy that time, because we weren't. I was struggling in a dark place and super sad. And so, but God was there. And I don't know beyond that. I don't think it's a lot different from other people, other than just, don't let it overwhelm you. This thing can feel so big. The phrase that I said several times in the writing was that the gay thing does not define me, but it's in the definition of me. And I think for a lot of secrets, when you let it define you and you let that thing in the past sort of dictate how you think and all your future course of action, to be honest and say, no, it is definitely part of my story, but I'm not giving it that much power anymore to kind of call the shots of how I act and think and feel. And so for me to even just sort of put this thing in its place to say, Brad, this isn't really who you are. Like, it's definitely a part of your sort of physiology, but you're somebody else, ultimately. So
that's helpful. That's awesome. Thank you. Here's the last question, Brett. How did your view of your relationship with God change once you decided to be this vulnerable?
I don't think it changed when I decided to be vulnerable. I think it started changing years before. And for me, I kind of got on this journey probably about 5 years ago of what I call just journey towards emotional health. I was just a very emotionally unhealthy person. Workaholic, worked too much. I would be jealous, would get offended easily at work, and began to kind of study how the brain works. That was a big part of it. I had a therapist who talked, we were in therapy one day, and he said, Brett, that verse about Paul says taking every thought captive. He said, there's science behind that. And neuroplasticity, he taught me through how the brain kind of rewires around that. And that's a spiritual principle revealed in Scripture.
Sure.
And so I just began to kind of try to get healthier and to quit hating myself. Self-hate is a phrase that's thrown around a lot around this issue. And I get it. I hated myself. When you think that this thing that is so bad and so evil is sort of baked into your body, and you can't take it off. You can't get rid of it no matter how much you pray and try. Every day you walk around with this cloud of oppression, feeling like all of God's wrath is centered on you. And so for me, it was sort of rediscovering grace and putting this thing in its place to say, Brett, this is some kind of weird physiological thing you don't understand, but Jesus is bigger than that, and that probably doesn't mean he's going to fix it. You don't find a lot of people who've been sort of cured from homosexuality. They're out there, and some of them have emailed me, and I don't want to marginalize their story, but just to be okay with that, to be okay with the fact that, like, man, we're broken. We're all going to be dead soon. Like, we get one shot to live. Like, I'd say that a lot. We're all dead in 100 years, and it sounds morbid, but it's like, that's great. Like, we're not going to live forever. Like, I mean, we are, but like in a different place. And so be free to be yourself and to be honest and stop walking around feeling like you've got to be perfect. Because nobody wants that. Nobody wants you to be perfect. They want you to be real and be yourself. And so the quicker you can be vulnerable, Brené Brown says excruciating vulnerability. Brené Brown says you can't be too vulnerable. That's what she says. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what she says. And so, man, just dig deep and be real, and you will find a lot of freedom. It's been super freeing for me to just let that cloud kind of go and to just trust Jesus, So
is it safe to say, I said that was the last question. This is me responding to that question. I love what you said, that I don't know that my relationship with God changed in the middle of it. I wonder if your relationship with God actually propelled you to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think the concept of we don't have anything to prove, I think really bad theology begins with my attempt to make God happy by good behavior and jumping through the hoops and smiling on Sunday morning. And I had a lot of that thinking programmed into my mind, and so there was sort of a deconstruction, for lack of a better term, of that bad theology and replacing it with more of a Jesus and grace-based approach. And so again, when that operating system switches up here and in your heart, like I think that was for me the difference of learning to kind of work through this and find healing. Community was a big piece of that. I didn't write about this much in the story, but the whole time I was in this dark kind of zone, I had really good friends who were next to me and who listened to me and let me cry on their shoulder. And they were grace to me. That was God's ministry to me. It was through people, and people who loved me and did not judge. They would, correct me at times and challenge my thinking, but at the end of the day, they were trustworthy people. So, yeah.
Brett, I got so emotional what you just said about it being baked into you and feeling like the entire wrath of God was pointed at you and resting on you. And I just feel so grateful for you and your courage to tell your story. I feel like I'm better because I've been able to meet you. So thank you. Thanks for your courage.
Yeah, and if you're gay here, LGBT, it may have been hard for you to come in the door, but I just want to say that you're incredibly loved, and no matter what anybody's told you or how you feel, you are so loved, and your future is very bright, and there's a lot of hope. A lot of hope on the other side of that, of that wall, whatever you want to call it. And that's not just coming out. It's not just making a show. That's not what it's about. It's just about learning to get things in the right order and, going with it. So.
That's great. Well, why don't we do this? Well, first of all, would y'all mind clapping for Brett and telling him thank you? You got one standing O, but I'll give you one. You got two, Brett. You got six. We'll all stand for you. You mind standing up, please? That would be great. Thanks. Why don't we do this? I'm going to pray. You can just stay standing. I'm going to pray for us, and then, Brett, I'd love it if you'd close us in prayer, if that'd be all right.
Yeah.
So let's pray. Father, we just thank you for tonight. I thank you for Brett, and God, that is not easy to feel the pressure of, one, sharing something so close to your heart. And so I just thank you for his courage and for his authenticity and his genuineness. But God, I also know that there's a lot of pressure in standing on a stage at a church because it makes it seem like you're putting yourself in a position that, God, I know I don't even think that I'm there, and I'm sure Brett doesn't think he's there. And so I just pray that you would continue to use him in powerful ways. I pray that you'd continue to give him creativity in the way he shares his message. You've clearly gifted him massively, God, at just the way he uses words, the way you've given him so much help. Thank you for his dad. Just what an incredible man that he was. Thank you for his mom and his brothers and just the army of people that have surrounded him in his whole life, that have given him the health that he has. And I just pray that you would continue to use him, not just with the LGBT community, but God, that you would use him to create more allies for that community, that you would use him in the lives of parents who have kids who have come out. But God, for every one of us that has a secret that we've never told anybody or something that about ourselves that we feel like you can't accept, I just pray that you'll continue to use him in powerful ways to free prisoners, because that's your ministry, and that's ultimately what we're all here to do. So I just thank you for him, and I thank you for his willingness to be a part of this tonight.
Lord, we love you, and thank you for your grace, and thank you for loving us, and we thank you for Jesus, and we know that's enough. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.